I want to welcome everyone for the first ever Digital Marketing with the Stars live lecture series. Neil Cameron is in the house, brought to you by the fun folks at Jelly Academy. Neil Cameron comes to us from TikTok. You probably are familiar with the app. If you are not, if you've seen people on campus dancing in front of their phone, in the bathroom, in the classroom, in dorms, they're probably making a TikTok. So Neil, thank you for joining us today.
You're very welcome. I'm excited to be here. Obviously sad can't be there in person, but this is amazing. And it's interesting, Darren, as you're talking about like who's attending, it just made me a little sentimental. It brought me back.
So let's go there. Tell me about where you went to. Maybe why don't we start with high school, and then where did you go to university and or college?
You really want to dig deep, like go way back.
Yeah, you could just touch on high school if you want.
Sure. It's just funny that I went to performing arts high school, so I thought I was going to be a drama major. So I was not an academic, meaning just like what's funny about that is I was not a great student. And so toward like as you're finishing high school, you're like, what am I going to do with my life? I had no idea. I just knew what I didn't want to do. And it's funny, it was actually knowing what I didn't want to do that actually got me into advertising. It was more the notion of just like, I knew I didn't want to work in a stuffy corporate office. You know, I knew I didn't want to wear a suit and a tie. I knew I didn't want to live and work in the suburbs. It was more of what I knew I didn't want that kind of led me on this path, which was kind of funny that that's sort of like what brought me here into this world. But I went to a community college. I was broke. I didn't have money. I had to pay for school myself. I paid for my tuition in cash that I made waitering. And so I went to school for advertising. And I was lucky in that after my second year, I got a summer job at an agency. And then they hired me on. So my final year of school, my last semester, there was a co-op semester, but my last semester was I did full-time school, full-time work for a semester.
Wow.
Which was a little nuts.
And where was this? Where was high school, and then where was university?
High school was just in the suburbs of Toronto. And my first agency job was at an agency called, and I can say the name because they don't exist anymore. It was called Communique.
Okay.
Which at the time was like the hottest ad agency in Toronto. Was like, we had every big account. And it was like a hot mess.
Wow.
But in the best way possible.
And what years was this? What years were you there?
I don't remember.
Okay.
Well, also maybe like over 22 years ago. Like we used Kinko's. I used to record things on a VCR. Does that sound right?
That is amazing.
I have no concept of time.
Okay, and what was the university that you're attending?
So it's Centennial College on the Danforth of Toronto, advertising. And of course, like everyone, I thought I was going to be a copywriter. And that's what you do. You think you're going to be an art director and a copywriter. And it wasn't till you start to enter the workforce, you're like, there's a whole other world that exists here. Yeah. And there's an entire subset of the industry where there's just a lot of demand for talent.
Yeah.
And I am so, as I mentioned, like when I say like hot mess, like my first job was probably the most intense work environment I've ever experienced in my life. But and I'll say this to you, and as I think about sort of who this audience is, your first job is not going to be your dream job. But because of it, I made relationships and friendships there that are still some of my closest friends today at my first agency.
Neil, say that again. Your first job won't be your what job?
It will not be your dream job.
Okay, won't be your dream job. Good to know. Okay.
And you might do things that are completely adjacent to where you want to be and what you want to be doing. But it allowed me to make a name for myself. And as I was preparing or thinking about today, I realized that every job I've had since has been a referral or because of an established relationship. And it's not because I know like famous, powerful people. It's more of just that, like, I have developed a good name in the industry because I'm pleasant to be around and I work hard. And that has gotten me to where it's gotten me far.
And speaking of your first, like, what kind of opened the door to work at the ad agency? Like, how did you physically walk in? Did a professor introduce you, or what was that introduction there?
It was classmates who are older that I used to play foosball with, got jobs there, and were like, we're really hungry for bodies, and you seem like a decent person, so you should come work here. So again, it was just like working relationships. And I think the funny thing was, I remember my interview was just like, again, it was just like this agency, it was blowing up so quickly. They just didn't have enough people. So I think my interview was about 7.5 minutes and I got the job and they're like, we're going to pay you $19,000 a year. And I thought I was so rich. And then I ate like bologna and pancakes for the next 2 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
So can you remember your first day and what that was like and kind of what you felt and maybe what you wish you would have known on your first day in the industry?
You think you know, but
Mhm.
you don't know. And there were so many times I was humbled. I just think of so many times I embarrassed myself because you sort of walk in and you think you know how to behave, you think you know how systems work. And there are things that like you just even don't learn at school. You don't learn at the time. I had no idea how the fax machine worked. So I used to fax blank pages to people because I'd put it in the wrong way. Like you just have to just you got to park the ego. And
Yeah.
that was the biggest thing I learned was just to park the ego. And as much as I thought I knew at school, it's not applied knowledge and applied learning. And
Yeah.
so much about the industry is also about relationships, and every organization is different and every client is different. And so you kind of have to, that's the biggest part. And even at TikTok, and even when I was working at Facebook, was you really have to suck it up and just really be, someone says this and it's so cliche, but you have to be a student of the business.
Yeah.
And you just kind of need to let go and recognize you don't know everything. And sometimes you just need to stay quiet for a little bit and just really observe and pay attention. And that was like the biggest thing, because I remember like I thought I was like so soft, and I like, oh, the stories I could tell you of how I embarrassed myself.
So as far as the knowledge you got at
Yeah,
university, Centennial, which is amazing,
yeah,
what's special about this group, this audience right now, is they're all people who are part of marketing clubs, marketing
yeah.
associations on campus, where they're working together as a team, they're building relationships. What can you speak to that and as far as like what you're going to learn in the classroom and what you're going to learn being as part of clubs?
I think the club thing is something that I didn't participate in, and I really regret it, because that is the biggest thing is really understanding and managing and navigating relationships and really coming together sort of as a team. That was, I would say, so first off, kudos to all of you on the line who are in a marketing club, because that was the other struggle is sometimes, especially in marketing and in at an ad agency, there's very loud voices,
Mhm.
and you have to understand and learn how to work with those loud voices, but also how to get your agenda across and how to infiltrate and make sure you're seen and you're heard, and learning just to sometimes that was, yeah, I would say that was the one thing that I didn't get at school. And that was the hardest part at the agency, was to sort of figure out like navigating those relationships, and having a voice, because it's very easy when you start your career for people to
Yeah.
look at you as this little youngin. They used to call me baby boy, and I had good ideas, but they weren't always heard, and so you just had to find ways to sort of infiltrate and do that. And that's part of it, was just to be like really strategic, figure out who to talk to, figure out who has your back, but also you just have to pack your ego. And that was the hardest thing that you also don't learn at school, is like sometimes your best ideas, else is gonna take it and run with it and get credit for it.
Yeah.
And I've had that happen, and you just have to suck it up, and that's just like a fact. And so I think those were the things that I didn't learn in school. So I learned a lot of the applied stuff: how to write a creative brief,
Yeah.
how to write an ad, how to write a media plan, how to execute a broadcast buy.
Yeah.
But you don't learn the ins and outs of like how to operate in a team dynamic.
Yeah.
And you didn't learn those hard lessons. And so those are the things that's funny, because I'm still learning them today. And I kind of wish I'd learned a lot more of that earlier on in my career.
And Neil, I want to go back to, you mentioned the foosball table
Yeah,
and playing foosball with those older
yeah,
students. So
yeah,
students that are listening to this right now, and they're looking around the
yeah,
room and seeing like, first year students are seeing fourth year students and
yeah.
second year students are seeing third year students. Tell me about that importance of those connections, because that's what brought you into the industry. And what was it like around the foosball? Was it talking shop, or did it just happen naturally, or did you pursue those older relationships?
I don't think I intentionally pursued it. Sometimes you're just looking for someone to play foosball with.
Yeah.
But what you start to do is you start to, though, develop a keen or like an aspirational eye,
Yeah.
which is what would start to happen is, so yeah, we would just talk the industry a little bit. We were in ad school, so someone would be like, oh, did you see what happened, did you read a marketing mag, but what's going on at Leo, I can't believe it. So we'd talk that stuff. But through that, I think though, you'd start to get an eye for your like, and this is the one thing, and I wrote this down, I'll tell it to you later, but as a piece of advice, is like, surround yourself by aspirational people, or people that you're like, I see how you think differently than me, and I know you're going to go far, so I'm going to stand next to you, and I'm going to keep my eye on you, and I'm going to watch you and kiss up
Yeah.
to you.
Yeah.
And I've always tried to do that in my career. And there's been times where I was, been working jobs and looking around and I'm like, I don't see those people anymore. And that's always when I'm like, it's time to go. Meaning it's always good you always want to work at a company where there's at least like 2 or 3 people who you're like,
Yeah.
I like the work they're doing,
Yeah.
or I aspire to do that job. And again, I've been at places and like I was a very senior role at an agency, and I was just like, and not that people weren't talented and not that people weren't amazing and lovely and good at their jobs, but I was just like, I don't see my future here anymore, and I don't see anyone that's I'm aspiring to or driving me to move forward. So that was when I knew I was like, I need to kind of go to the other side of things. So that was what it was. Like at the foosball table, you start to hear these voices and be like, oh, they're really tuned in, or like, again, you're just like, I'm going to try and eat my lunch next to them. Because they're also again, you also have to recognize that they're a couple years ahead of you. They've been exposed to different things. And like, it was the hardest thing to learn to ask for help. And to bounce ideas off of people. Cause I always used to think like, if I always asked for feedback on some copy I had written or things like that, that I wasn't a good copywriter. This led to a copywriting class, but it's like, that is so important. This is to build a network of people that you can go to and bounce ideas off of. And I think that's what it also became, was you had these older students, you could be like, when you did this project, did you feel like this? Or like, did you struggle with this? And just to like that reassurance. Because it can, you don't want to feel like an island. Who wants to feel like an island?
No, never.
Do you want to feel like an island? No,
never.
No.
I love the way you described the reason why you would leave, said job. It wasn't because you maybe were feeling, you were just restless. It was like, I want good mentorship. I want good people to look up to. So maybe tell us about your journey. You started at the ad agency. Where did you go from there? Because I just think, everyone wants to know, how do you end up at TikTok? So, but there was a process there. This is
And the process is not a straight line, and it is many loop-de-loos, and there are some down moments. Like I've had some pretty awful jobs, or worked on awful pieces of business. So it's gone all over the place, but it has been about sort of following people. I was fortunate the agency that I was working at, that was the hottest agency, also became the fastest crashing agency. So when I started, was the hottest agency, and then they started to lose all their big accounts, and that was very humbling. And I remember like there was a period where I was like, I need to get out of here, and I don't have a lot of options, because I'd only been in the industry for a year and a half. So what did I know? Who did I know? And someone who left worked in advertising research at the Toronto Sun, which is a tabloid newspaper. Doesn't necessarily have the best reputation, was not a place I wanted to go to, and it was not a place that I saw myself reflected, but it was just a means to like pay the bills. But then again, it was just, but what I started to get exposure to was, again, and this is something I always say as advice, is like, early on in your career, like make that resume look as deep and wide. Have a resume that you can make look deep, but also wide. And so again, it was just like exposure to, it was not a place I wanted to be. I knew I was gonna be there like a year and a half, and sure enough, I was, but met new people and new relationships and new skill set. And I've always sort of done that, is always made sure that like, I've never gotten too specialized, because the second you're super specialized, you almost sort of work yourself out of a job. I have friends of mine who have stayed at agencies their entire career and have very specialized roles. And can I tell you, there are 5 of those roles in Canada. So meaning that like, I've always tried to make sure, at least my resume, that I have the opportunity and the flexibility. And so lucky that way. But then, I started and then went back to agency because I was burned, and then people brought me along. So it's funny because, again, as much as I'd like to think that I drove my career, people have always sort of brought me along. And then the most recent gig was I was at Bell Media working in business strategy. And I saw that Facebook was hiring, and someone I used to work with at an agency was running the team there. And again, it's not about who you know. Like, you don't, people always think like relationship mapping is I need to know the president, or it's like, I will say this, I'm not the smartest person in the room, but like, I have a good reputation because like I work hard. I'm a team player. I don't stir up trouble. And like, so in that sense, I have a good name, or relationships I can rely on. And that's that's what got me in at Facebook. And I was there for 3 years.
Wow. That's
and
incredible.
Then someone from TikTok was like, hey, we're this app that's really blowing up and we want to work with you again. So is a bunch of people that left Facebook. So they sort of brought me over. So
Wow.
again, my career has really been driven by relationships and
Yeah.
maintaining those,
Yeah.
and also recognizing, I'll say this as a piece of advice, someone gave me this. It is a small industry and everybody knows everyone and everybody talks. And you have no idea who you're sitting next to at a event. And I learned that lesson very early on. So I always try to stay positive. I don't try to badmouth anyone. I've had ex clients become my boss. I've had people that I've not gotten along with become my client. And that's just the nature of the beast.
Wow. I know there's like Dale Carnegie's like How to Win Friends and
Oh
Influence
yeah.
People book. There's the classics, but just to kind of break it down as far as advice, like when you're sitting at the desk, when you're showing up, what are some kind of basic, hey, here's how to do well. Here's how to get a reputation like you, Neil, to say, I'm not saying I'm not trying to just put you on a pedestal, but if you're like,
Yeah.
hey,
Oh,
I just,
don't put, yeah, I'm not on pedestal and I'm not like some rock star in the industry, but like,
what are some basic kind of like work hard? Here's how people notice this about me. And again,
yeah.
I know you have a great, you're humble, you have a great reputation. It's just more, you're like, people know me as someone who showed up on time. If I said I was going to do it, I did it. What are some examples of things that you could just,
Well, one thing, and to this day, there is no job beneath me. So I manage a team, and my team sometimes is doing way more sophisticated, exciting work than I do. And I'm happy to say, like, guys, you're working your asses off. There's a bunch of contracts that need, or like paperwork needs to be done. Like, I will take it. So there's nothing above me or below me. And that has just also always fostered that sort of team environment. And how I've also been able to build relationships is that is just to stay humble and stay hungry.
yeah.
What was a quick question? Like, how do you keep like,
What are some things that you just did, like when you got reviewed at agencies or when you worked at Bell or Rogers? What are
yeah,
maybe some of the reviews were like, man, I just love this about you, Neil. Like no one else really does this, or like, you're willing
was it
to,
just always a culture of like raising my hand for no matter like things that are actually sometimes below me and sometimes above me,
yeah,
meaning that that notion of like, always being willing to sort of put yourself out there. So recognize for that,
yeah,
checking in on your colleagues,
yeah, yeah,
like just pulling people aside and just ask how they're doing. And like,
yeah,
just the little things, one of the things that someone said this, and I'm going to spoil because I said I wrote like a list of like
yeah, yeah.
things, top 7 things I've learned in my career. And I'm going to keep I'm not going to bring this up later on. I'll try not to duplicate. But someone said this to me once, and I was like, that is it's such a good thing, such a good piece of advice. Someone said, whenever you go for an interview, never ask about the culture of an office.
Mm.
And people think that culture is just this thing. And people ask me that all the time. I was, what's the culture of TikTok? How is it different? What's the culture? What was the culture like at Facebook or at Bell Media or
Yeah,
like at these other big companies? And you're like, the culture is not a tangible thing. It's made up
yeah,
of the contributions of all the individuals and all the people. And one of the best piece of advice someone gave me is on an interview, always ask the person who's interviewing you, say, what is it that you do to contribute to the culture of this office?
wow,
And when someone taught me that, that was something that registered or is something that I've also always been called out for is I recognize that I have a role to play in
yeah,
shaping the culture of the office. And you have to be an active
mm.
contributor to that. So yeah, I have always done stupid things. Like when I worked at Rogers, we had
Yeah,
video dance party Fridays at like 3 o'clock, and like people got to submit requests. Like I've done stupid things. Like I've dressed up as an elf and handed out like candy. Like, but that's kind of you do have to play an active part, and you
yeah,
have to contribute, and you can't
yeah,
just sit back and reap the benefits of the culture. So I would
yeah,
say, and again, even at Facebook, I remember like I get this job. I think I'm like pretty senior in my career.
yeah.
And someone was like, guys, we're in desperate need. Someone needs to man and let guests up in the elevator because security is busy or something. And I
Yeah.
was like, yeah, I'll do it. I'll be there. I'll put aside my work and I will spend 3 hours letting people up and down an elevator because, again, culture is made up by all of our contributions. And so I think that's the biggest thing to remember.
That's really profound. Thank you.
Is it
And
profound? Well,
yeah, like
someone told me I'm just ripping it off, but yeah.
but I feel like I expected a different answer. I think what's profound about it is that it's like, hey, do the paperwork, service the elevator, And you know, those small things, it's almost like the servanthood. You serve others to go places.
Serve yourself, and the hardest thing is you feel like you don't get recognized for it, but you do. And sometimes you do have to wrap that stuff up in a bow and merchandise it and take care of yourself. Because sometimes, yes, it does not always get recognized.
Yeah.
But what I've learned is if you do that stuff over the long term, it does always pan out. I've had hotshot colleagues that have just like risen up the ranks super fast, rock stars of the industry, and they're nowhere to be seen anymore because they burned hard and burned bright, but didn't take care of people necessarily on the way up. Because again, it's a roller coaster, and you never know when you're gonna be up, and you never know when you're going to be down. And so helping out, just having a good sort of peer group again has helped me, because I don't have those relationships. I don't have like, not buddies with with like CMOs. I don't like hang tight with agency presidents on the weekend. So I've had to get there just by like putting it in. And that's why I think that again it's those little things, especially in your first job and your first gig, is like trust me, I've cried in the bathroom. Like I have full on sat on the john and had a weep. But like, you gotta put it in and put in that extra. And again, you don't feel it. And that's the hardest part. And again, some people steal your ideas. You don't always get recognition, but like over the long term, it always pays out. Amazing. At least that's my belief. Some people could be like on the line, be like, that is not true.
We had a question from a student that was saying, okay, I use TikTok. I love TikTok.
TikTok.
Yeah, I'm on it for hours a day.
Yes.
How, when I get an internship or I get a co-op or a practicum, how can I provide value with the tool? What can, some of the co-ops they may get, I'm assuming because they may be like, you're the young intern we hired, show us how to use TikTok. How can they use it and show how a brand can use it commercially, both maybe from an organic and or an ads perspective?
I think one thing that's really interesting, and I'll talk about it more also as young people in the early stages of your career, and is that notion of like, you bring value because your youth brings you value. And don't forget that and lose sight of that. And like, so what a lot of conversations I have with a lot of senior marketing leads at top companies across Canada, and talking to them about TikTok, is they're very scared. It's a little daunting to them. Here's this platform that is all about people showing up, being in their authentic selves, reacting to trends, things like that.
Well, and also recently in the news, saving people's lives. The hands, remember the hand signal?
Oh, I saw that. Yeah, I saw that.
It's incredible. Yeah,
it's amazing. But I think to answer the question a bit is, I think what you can do is start to help brands and businesses. The thing I love about the app, and you and I, we can debate this, but I love the notion of it because it is sort of democratized content distribution and creativity. Brands and companies can start to dimensionalize and reach new communities in a way that's way more scalable, right? You don't have to have a big glossy, you don't have to produce 47 anthemic spots. You can shoot something on a mobile device. And I think what you can bring, or the value that especially people who are, passionate about the app can bring to businesses, is showing them how to like start to connect with niche audiences and communities that have never been addressed before. And really, again, it's that notion of like, I think sometimes in marketing, sometimes things are treated so precious and brands are so precious. And I think we need to get out of that space a little bit, and that we start to need to show brands filtered through different lenses and different people and different experiences. Because there was just such a heyday. I even think about growing up in the industry, like during the 90s, where brands were put on this pedestal and they were untouchable, and you couldn't do anything with them because they were so precious and finite and perfect and pristine. And I think, there's an opportunity for brands to get a little down in the dirt and play and have fun, but also be responsible and reflect the communities that they serve. And that's where I see there's such a gap. And that's what's cool about TikTok, is that you can do that. So I would say for the people on the line, or people that are listening to this, it's like, bring your youth, bring that energy, and start to like walk companies down a path. And like, you sort of have to start to hold their hand and lead them. Because I'll also say that change does not, especially if you're getting a marketing job, change does not happen overnight, and it's little baby steps, but you just kind of need to little chip away at it and have a bit of a master plan for yourself. Get a couple allies, get some people who see the work you're doing, who are advocating for you, start to chip away. And that's the one thing, again, TikTok, you can do that on there.
So I want to talk about the resource that people can sign up for.
Yeah.
The e-newsletter, the resource, where can they go for some TikTok resources?
Yeah, so if you go to TikTok,
so
if you go to TikTok for Business, first up, sign up for our creator newsletter. This is a newsletter that goes out to the creators, and no, they're the lifeblood of the platform. So it is all the tips and tricks about how to start to build content that resonates, and also how to start to think like a creator. And I think that's where there's opportunities for brands. So again, to think about your value, and all this stuff, by the way, this is stuff you put on your resume. And I think there's that notion of like, what do I bring to the table? What is my currency if I'm applying for a job fresh out of school? Your currency is your eagerness, your openness, your resourcefulness, the fact that you're tied into different communities. If you go to the TikTok Business Learning Center, there is e-modules you can take and I know it feels weird, but like on a resume, I've completed all 72 TikTok e-learning modules. Like these are little check marks. And again, that you need to start to do to sort of stand out. And I will say that like evaluating a lot of, we're growing so quickly. I can't tell you the number of resumes I've had to review and interviews I've been in. And what is always stands out is when people, sometimes like they don't have the experience, but you see the scrappiness and the passion and the excitement, and that they're willing to also put in the work. That always rises above, and that always stands out. So sign up for the creator newsletter, take the e-courses. I would also say just like sign up, like, and this is feels like a shameless sales plug, but like get a TikTok account, but play around with the discovery feed. And start to search keywords and start to get a sense of like, what is the rhythm and what's blowing up? Because that's what's so cool about it, is it's such a dynamic environment. And again, if you're going into an interview, like go and bring some value. Be like, hey, just, I was just checking out TikTok, and I don't know if you noticed this, but there's an entire sub community that has built this brand experience or is interacting with your brand in this way. And I don't know if you knew that. Like, that's what's so cool, especially with social platforms, is you guys now have such a cool, I never had that like in the industry when I started. And I don't know about you, Darren, when did you start?
1999, same as you.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think I was well, we'll talk about how old we are. I think I started a bit before you, but yeah, we didn't have that. And the cool thing about social media and all these other platforms is the amount of the insight you can get, and so the value you can bring to an interview, or again, just that demonstration of like, hey, I'm really leaning into what the conversations people are having about your brand, and have you seen this? So definitely, I would say use the discovery, just use the discovery field just to discover and
I love that idea. I love
to the table.
Bring value to the interview. Do some research ahead of time and say, hey, I know your brand intimately. Look what I just discovered here for you.
And that's something I've learned at TikTok is we always try is, when meeting with an organization is always, the meeting has to always be centered around them and their business. We need to be secondary. Our platform and what we're pitching needs to be auxiliary to that. And that always goes a long way. So
that's an amazing nugget for interview. Give me some nuggets for like resumes. What are the resumes recently maybe that you saw that just stood out? Or maybe LinkedIn, their LinkedIn profiles.
I always look at first off, just a little element of graphic design helps. I'm sorry, it does. I'm sorry.
Maybe use Canva.
Sure, something easy to read. It does not need to be splashy. It doesn't need to be flashy. I think personality is always what stands out for me. So when someone, especially, for TikTok, when someone can articulate what the platform means to them or their relationship or what they get out of it, that always stands out. So never just mass send out. Every time you send out a resume, you need to tailor it to whatever organization you're applying to. And so it never stands out when it feels generic. It always stands out when someone, you're like, okay, they have a clear connection, but also an understanding of what they're signing up for. So what always stands out is where someone will say like, hey, I recognize you've been in market, in Canada as a business, like an operating business unit for like a year. So I know what it means to work at a startup. And I know that things are going to be broken and not work. And I'm like, thank you. I think what always is a detraction is when someone has this idyllic sense of what the organization is or where we're at. And you're like, no, you've missed the mark. So do your homework. Glassdoor, there's so many like reviews of like what it's like to work at different companies. So I think showing at least a level of obviously you still want to, you're applying for a job, but I think just recognizing the reality or the state of the business or where they're at and what the opportunities are, that show a monochrome of effort, and it definitely rises above.
That's awesome. And now that you're doing interviews via Zoom, any Zoom interview tips for folks that something maybe you've seen recently that you're like, man, someone did this and it was awesome, or this small little thing made a difference?
And okay, well, because I don't want people to do this and now it's just going to end badly for them. But I did have an interview once where the person just had like their background. It was not like they were like, hire me now, but they clearly sort of curated it that it was like, it was just there. It was them. So they were on the screen and their background it was like these angel wings that were kind of like lit up, but it was just like this energy. And it was just this very much like recognizing those things that you miss over Zoom and finding ways to sort of bring that out. So this was someone who was very enthusiastic. So they had a very enthusiastic, like it kind of mirrored the energy that they wanted to communicate and have across. I think, you know what? Yeah, still put a bit of polish. I've had some Zoom interviews where I'm like, I get it. We're all working from home. It's not pretty. Some of us are, in our parents' basements, and I get it. Like, I get it. But like, still show up and recognize it's an interview. And also, I'm not stupid. I can tell when you're reading. So I'd rather someone be like, I like it when people own that they're like, hey, just so you know, I've written these 5 values that I just really want to focus on because I think it's so clear, like you hear that. So I just take ownership. We all now have little hacks that we use. Because trust me, Darian, I have a bunch of notes next to me. But I think sometimes if you just acknowledge it and demonstrate you're prepared, like that you're prepared, that is a great way to get over this sort of block that happens. Because again, people read up and pick on things. Like I can tell when you're looking at a card. So why not just own it, but do it in a meaningful, purposeful way.
That's great advice there. Because who knows when in-person interviews will start up again. So this is great tips for people that are...
The one thing is it is funny because it is also a great equalizer too.
Yes. Yeah, very much so. Yeah. If you're more of an introvert or you're feeling uncomfortable in person, this is a good chance.
Yeah. I mean, I'm trying to think about my interview process for TikTok. It was like 6 or 7 interviews, all virtual. And I'd never done that before. Actually, it was the first time doing it. It felt very weird. It's also weird because it's also very, in some ways, can also be very intimate in that you're like, I'm interviewing with someone who's very senior at an organization and I can see what book you're reading. I know what you just ate for lunch. I can see that like your kid wrote like on the wall in marker. But I think you also have to not totally acknowledge that. You kind of have to still keep a bit of a balance there.
Oh, that's awesome. Now, I know you prepared some advice, some incredible ideas. You've shared one so far. You've teased us with. I know you've got a few more. Give us your list of advice. This is a great listicle, BuzzFeed-esque top piece of advice.
And I'm going to charge for these. Like if I see someone like wearing one of these on a t-shirt, like I'm going to sue. Like these are trademark. Like I will hunt you down and break your legs.
Neil, have you made this a TikTok video yet where you're like, here's my advice, boom, boom. You know the one, you know the video where you point to it?
Yes, I should. I just will admit something. I'm not really good at making TikToks.
We'll work on that. We can
I know, we'll work on it. Exactly. So one that I wrote, and this is the one that I'm like, oof, was a hard thing to learn. Was like, don't mistake, and I might not get it right, but this notion of like, don't mistake momentum for impact.
Wow.
And it is so easy at a company to think that you're bringing value because you're so busy. And so you sit here and you go in for a review and you're like, look at everything I've done. Look at, I did this and I've done this and this and this and this. And it's like, but that's not necessarily impact. And it took me a long time to learn what impact means. And impact means doing things that are transformative for the business or your client's business. It is doing things that scale to other teams and have positive role there. It's just so easy to sort of, and especially, TikTok is a very flat organization. So you know, the way that you sort of get recognition is by demonstrating true meaningful impact,
Yeah.
and really thinking about and making sure things are quantifiable. I would also say this is another nugget that someone told me, and when they told me this, I wanted to punch them in the throat, but now I'm like, it's so true. It's the best piece of advice. Day one, when you start your job, like day
Yeah.
one or at the beginning of every year, pre-write your performance review. Like write what
Wow.
you want it to say. Not in full detail, but
Yeah.
like, I want it to say that I did this, that I accomplished this, that I did this, and that I did this. Because it just forces you just to be a bit more crystal about the things that you want to be recognized for.
Mm.
It allows you to carve out things that you actually think are going to be impactful, because it's very easy for day-to-day work to get in the way of that. And then do yourself a favor and you set up a folder on your computer, in your email, and every time you get recognition of like, even a client sends you is like, this was amazing, or we're now applying this, we're now using this, you just drag and drop that. The biggest mistake I see people see, and I say this to my team, is we go into review period and then they go, what did I do this year? And they're like, oh, what did I accomplish? And they can't quantify it. And I learned this the hard way, but I've also learned it coming up, like when I was at Facebook, I this was something I learned, like to be able to say like, oh, just so you know, I had after that presentation, I had 72 positive emails, and this is what it drove in terms of revenue. Like, you gotta have the nuggets to back it up. So do yourself a service. I have a running notes list where I just write down all my accomplishments and meaningful things outside of versus just sort of like day-to-day work or things that's going to happen naturally. Okay. Oh, also recognize when your company is letting you down.
Okay. Tell us what that means.
I was at an agency working on a very big piece of business, a very senior client.
Yeah.
It was not a positive experience.
Okay.
It was a very dark period in my career. I was not very happy.
Yeah.
And someone quite senior recognized this and was like, on it from an outside, not even within the agency I was working at, and was like, I see what's happening here. And you're really down on yourself, but you're actually not being set up for success. Your leadership has essentially sold the client into a service that you guys don't really normally provide, and they've sort of dropped that on you. And so my worth was, I had this feeling of sort of failure and was really struggling during this period, but I realized that my company just hadn't set me up for success and hadn't given me the tools to do the job that needed to be done. And that's just an important thing to realize, to get yourself out of those moments, but also taught me that you need to also learn how to advocate for yourself. And it's important is that articulation of like, here's where where you're letting me down, or where the organization is not giving me the tools to deliver the results I want to be delivering, or the outcomes that we as a company want to deliver. I also think if you can articulate that and put it in writing, you got yourself covered for a performance review if it comes back negative, is to say, I've clearly identified a gap. And I learned some of this stuff was doing Six Sigma process design work, which is like, have you ever done that stuff?
No, what is it?
It's just like, I got pulled into it once, and I got to go through this training program. I was at a company, not an agency, but like in the media vendor side. And it's just about process design and process mapping. But it was really the notion of like faults in people. What Six Sigma taught me, and again, I'm not very smart, so this is a very dumbed down like articulation of it. But what I took away from it was, so you do process design and you map out all the problem areas that exist within the process. And what often people do is they just immediately come up with a solve, which sometimes just actually just accelerates the problem. So it's this notion of just doing what Six Sigma taught me was the notion of like looking and trying to understand where things are breaking down, and really asking yourself the question of why, and what the potential workarounds are, and if those are even available or exist. And that's where you can start to say, again, you're like, this is why this isn't working, or why it's breaking down. I think it's really important to be able to articulate these things. And I will say this in your career, I've also learned this because I can be a little, I talk big. What's the word someone used? But you really need to be able to crystallize things and have a clear articulation of a problem, why that problem exists, and what you've been able to diagnose. Because if you're just a hand raiser, just to be like, this is annoying, or this doesn't work, or I'm frustrated, Oof, good luck. You're not going to go very far.
These have been great. We'll put a link to the Six Sigma
I don't know.
principles as well.
Maybe I might have to do a little research. Oh, and then my other note that I wrote was like cynicism. It's so negative, but like sometimes cynicism is a good sign that it's time to leave.
Okay.
Which was that notion of always surround yourself by people who are sort of aspirational. Is
Yeah.
if you're sitting there and you're not, that job or that a piece of business at an agency where I talked about it was sort of like the darkest point of my career.
Yeah.
I stayed at that company for 8 years though,
Wow.
because I loved the people I was surrounded with, and there was aspirational people, and I wasn't cynical, and it was just, again, it's that notion of ups and downs. And then luckily we won a big piece of business. I got to work on that, and it was phenomenal. So, I mean, sometimes people, it's so funny when people are like, "Oh, I hate my job," and I'm like, what's going on? What is it? Is it like, break that down and give me a clear articulation of it, and maybe it's just not the right role or the right team. And again, it even comes back to that notion of like culture is bigger than also maybe what you're doing day to day, so just keep an eye out. And sometimes, again, if you do the grunt work on the awful account, it gets recognized, and I got handed the good account. But that was why I eventually got out of agency, was I was just starting to get cynical. It's like I'd heard it all before I was done, and that's when you're like, you know what, maybe it's time for a career change.
That's cool.
Or a change in direction a bit.
Yeah. And so it's so cool to think that you've done agency side, you've done kind of the media side, media, you call it outlets, and now you're on, I guess, what do you call it? Like the outlet side.
Platform side. Vendor. Yes.
There you go. You've done all three. Actually, but the one you haven't done, brand side. Did you ever, I guess, no brand yet? Maybe that's your next season.
No, a little bit. A little bit, in the sense that, well, what's also fun, or what's interesting, or what I do like about being on the platform side, is we are also so I'm with it, supporting sales and marketing in the agency ecosystem, but we all are also supporting the brand and the development and the health of TikTok as a platform. And what's amazing is thinking about all the work that I'm doing, it also contributes to the brand and the perception and people's relationship with the platform and the app. Meaning that what's cool about this platform is a good, sound, solid, strong, entertaining ecosystem benefits us all, which then also helps with things like growing user base and time spent and all these things. So it's fun. It's what I like about it is it's all kind of interconnected. It's kind of cyclical in a way.
Neil, I got a question from a student.
Yes.
So I'm about to graduate. I'm struggling, and their question was, I'm trying to decide to go agency side or brand side. So I'm going to expand on their question and say, do I go agency side, or maybe I'm going to redo their question and say, who do you think agency side is made for personality wise versus what personality fits agency, what personality fits brand, what fits platform, and what fits media?
Yeah. I mean, I will say this, agency jobs are easier to get. So first off, sometimes that's something like, go for an agency job. The greatest thing about agency is you just get exposed to so much so quickly.
Yeah.
And exposed to, I remember I was at an agency for a year.
Yeah.
We had a bunch of major clients in town. My boss can go to a meeting, and she was like, you need to take the CMO of this very big client for lunch. And here I'm 21 years old, and I'm like, okay, hey, blah, 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 let's go for lunch. So I'll say the one thing about agency is it is great for people, first off, that like project work, that like ever evolving, that love and value relationships and get off on that. It's funny because I'm actually an introvert. And it's that energy and that pace. But what I will say is what it makes agency such a great training ground is the different exposure that you get. And that's why I always, everyone always wants to go into a marketing job. Everyone wants to get that job, at the top, these amazing companies. And, I want to be a brand manager on X.
Yeah.
And good luck and good on you. Those jobs are really hard to get and very competitive. And I've seen a lot of people go very far within those companies because they've come up through the ranks of agency. So I'm a bit of an agency advocate or leaner.
Yeah.
I will say, going direct and working in marketing at a company, it's certainly a lot more structure.
Yeah.
It's good for people that really enjoy sort of process.
Yeah.
I would say it is way more about XFN relationships and more about, agencies is kind of chaotic. And as much as you're working with XFN teams, you're not working with legal and procurement and distribution and signage and things like
and explain that. XFN just for those that
it's like cross-functional teams.
Yes. Yeah.
Perfect. I do find and even at TikTok, my relationship, I've never had a job where I have to work with so many different types of people in so many different roles. And I start to see that more within other organizations. Like at agency, you're barely talking to a legal team. I talk to a legal team like every day. Like I'm talking to a comms team, I'm talking to that. So I will say that's the cool thing about going marketing and sort of direct. I'll say it's way more analytical at client direct. Is more sort of so I'd say it's more for that sort of mind. Certainly a bit more business focused. It's not as wild. It's not agency life as well.
So, and then what about media versus platform? Like, and do you think there's a chance for someone to go right into media or right into platform, or are those maybe more?
I mean, right to a media agency, like, anyone can get a job there because it's such high in demand. Right into platform is challenging. We do not tend to hire people directly out of school because especially it is so technical, and you need to have an understanding of the ecosystem and the platforms as well, and not just our platform, but as well as competitors' platforms. So it is really hard if you want to go. And again, it comes down to what you want to do. And I think this sounds a little callous and a little bit gross, but like also think about the lifestyle you want and like where you want to go. Like these are part of the considerations. And like when I was young, I wanted to have fun. I wanted to work in a vibrant environment where we'd have crazy parties, and like that's at agency. But you're not going to make the money, but you get wined and dined a lot more. And like if you're very focused on you want to make a lot of money early on in your career, go into sales. The best way to make money is to make money for a company. So like these are some of the questions you also kind of need to ask yourself. Is also a bit of sort of lifestyle. All agencies are typically in major urban centers, downtown cores. If you don't want to live downtown, maybe go work in marketing. Like, I know it sounds funny, but these are some of the things you actually do have to think about. It is important just to think about your lifestyle and where you want to go. And I know it sounds so daunting and so frustrating, like to be like, you have to think about the next 15 years of your life, but it is important to ask yourself. And I think that's how I got into advertising, was by having some realistic expectations or realistic conversation with myself of like, what do I want my lifestyle to look like? And who do I want to surround myself with? And I will say at agency, it's way more, you get to work with art directors, copywriters, very creative people who are at the top of their game. You don't get that as much at I'm looking at my partner. He works at a traditional in a marketing role, and he looks at what I do and he's like, did you just do that? Like have a big Halloween party and thing? I'm like, yeah, I don't know. It's just different. It's very different world.
That's very good. That's a good, helpful kind of lay of the land and the options.
I think the biggest thing is honestly, like early on in your career, you just like get in. And you also don't know the things you're going to be exposed to and the things that you're going to love. And I think what happens so often is people come out of school are so dead set on like, okay, I want to become a brand manager or a junior brand manager, and this is the path I want to go on. There's an entire subset in the industry you have no idea about that you may love, that you're like, I had no idea. I love packaging. Or I love production.
Or SEO is this great part of marketing.
There's so much opportunity there, but I will say part of it is you just need a bit of that buffer on. And so sometimes I'll say agency jobs, because it's a very youthful industry, probably easier to get a job there, but then use that. And if you want to go eventually like client side or work at a platform or things, think about those next 2 or 3 steps that are going to get you there. But you have to start somewhere.
Yeah, that's great. That's really great advice. Now, do we miss anything from your list? Is there anything left on there that we need to cover?
No, I think we got a lot of them. Oh, I think that I've kind of hinted at a bunch of them. I think that other notion that I sort of said is like, always make sure you're relevant. And like, I'm not looking for a job, but I will always go on LinkedIn and be like, are there at least 5 or 6 jobs that I know I'm qualified for or that I'm also interested in? And it's a good reality check is like, am I learning? Am I developing? Am I still staying relevant with the market? And this industry changes and moves so quickly. And I'd say the hardest thing in this industry, whether you're in marketing, whether you go work at an agency, et cetera, is just how quickly it changes and how agile you need to be. And so it's always just good to make sure, like, am I still relevant? because I've had that feeling of being at companies where I'm like, I feel like I'm on the Titanic a bit and we're letting on water, and now is a good time.
Yeah. Wow. And as far as educating yourself and getting, inspiration, maybe do you have any like resources or books or newsletters that you'd recommend, or even kind of where you go for that, or where you have gone for that sort of kind of like
This sounds bad.
rapid reskilling, or kind of what's in Mario when you punch up and you get the little mushroom?
Yeah, I mean, not a
Power-ups.
lot, and I'll tell you that this. I mean, it's something because in the industry, right? People always talk about like what books, what are you reading, whatever. Like, I find at the end of the day, I am so tapped out
Yes.
that like I can't read about the industry. Like, I just don't have the bandwidth for it.
Yeah.
I will say I follow. Is it The Hustle, which is a
Yeah.
newsletter?
Yeah.
It's incredible. That one I love
That's
just
a
because it's
great
like very
one.
headline driven.
Yeah. We'll put a link in the show notes for that.
Yeah, I mean, I love Twitter just because you can kind of curate those headlines for yourself just to sort of stay relevant and in the know. But I also find it's also, oh, this is a bit of advice here. We work in marketing.
Yeah.
So we're surrounded by marketers. So we're surrounded by people who know how to market.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's also very easy to get led down a path or not to read too much. But I do think it's important also just to sort of step away, like have a healthy cutoff and step away from it, but also recognize like I'm reading things that are written by people who know how to market to me, meaning that like I'm a marketer having conversation with another marketer. So we're just busy like trying to put on the positive spin and stuff. And I've seen it can be very easy sometimes to read an article and go down a spiral. And sometimes I think it's important to take a step back. And especially with how quickly now information comes and moves, and it's so easy to take things out of context, or you really kind of need to step back sometimes, read between the headlines, because it is very easy to get spun. And so personally, I don't read a lot of industry news. Part of it's just because I feel so embedded in it, and like I just meant for my own also mental well-being. I just at the end of the day, I need to like, if I'm long enough at 8 o'clock at night, like I am done. Like
you need a John Grisham novel. Put on Only Murders in the Building on Disney
know what
Plus.
Know what I cannot speak more highly about is the British, or like the Great Canadian Baking Show.
I'm obsessed. Yeah, I'm in season 4 of Canada. I finished British, and I'm season 4. Actually, season 3. There was a marketer from Toronto on season 3 named Colin. Colin works for the Retail Council of Canada as a marketer. So yeah.
Do you know what is amazing about that show? And I'm sorry if I'm off topic, but I think there's a beautiful lesson in here. They are competing for a glass plate.
Yeah, that's it. And they're crying and they're hugging and they support each other. It reminds me of what you've taught today. I think one of the biggest lessons I've got out of this is what I call it, embodied in the British and Canadian baking show is be kind to each other. It's a small tent.
It is a small tent. And trust me, you're going to see people who are vicious, and they might start to move way ahead of you. And you're like, I've had that. I've had managers say you're too nice, or like, you're not aggressive enough, or you're never going to, you're not going to be successful because you let people walk on you. And I'm like, maybe that's true. And maybe it's just taken me longer to get where I am. But like, again, those people are like, they come and they go very quickly. And again, word gets around, and like, also we're not saving lives. So let's have fun a little bit. Like, let's just relax a bit. But that's also how you get remembered. And to this day, I just had someone very senior, like randomly just reach out, was like, hi, can I get your advice or something? I'm like, absolutely. And this is someone I hadn't heard for years. But that's what will keep you employed, like it'll keep you employed, keep you marketable and memorable, versus just always willing to step over people.
Wow, Neil, this is incredible. Thank you so much for coming to our first ever live lecture series, our first ever digital marketing with the stars. This is very cool. I think what's interesting about your star and using the term of what we're calling this is you are kind of a steady star burning. And that's your advice to people is don't just try to be a burn fast, burn quick, because that also burns out quick. Just stay steady, keep pouring fuel on your star and be that light for other people around you.
But also every organization has a different pace and is at a different pace, and you need to acknowledge that and respect it. and find ways to move your agenda or push it along. And
Mm.
so again, like you might get a marketing job at a very staid, family-run organization that's
Yeah.
been doing things the same way for the past 40
Yeah.
years.
Yeah.
And you're not going to be that change agent that you might be at a different company, but you need to respect that, but then find ways to like infiltrate and slowly chip away. And so you can always push your agenda. It's just how hard and where to push is what you need to know.
It's empathy. Sounds like empathy for
Yeah,
yourself and
that's a
empathy for
good one.
others around you.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
great. Neil, anything else you want to leave with students as we wrap this up here?
Oh yeah. Just one thing. I did
Yes.
this exercise a little while ago and I was like, oh, this is gonna be the stupidest thing ever. Have you done this? Is it with Gallup and Gallup or just Gallup Strengths Finder?
Yes.
Have you done the
Yes.
Strengths Finder exercise?
Yeah.
It's like $35.
Yeah.
I did it and I was like, I was rolling my eyes and like, this is gonna be the worst thing. It's so useful.
That's awesome.
It's a really great exercise in knowing, because some of the Myers-Briggs and personality things, I don't know if I entirely,
Berkman
some of those
is one.
Oh, there's so many of them. But that was one where I was like, hey, I can see the application of this.
Yeah.
And it kind of helped me at least understand to know what I'm working with and like what my secret sauce is, to also know where I'm not strong. And I think sometimes it's just, I would say always piece of good advice in your careers is take time just to look inwards too, and just be like, where am I at? Where am I falling short? And listen to people, like listen. There's seasoned, smart people around you, listen to them. And again, find your people to like sit next to at lunch. Just like the what did you call this? What's the name of the session? The stars of
live lecture. Not Dancing with the Stars, but digital marketing with the stars. Yes.
Yeah, but like find a couple North Stars that also just like, okay, I'm just gonna keep my eye out. Like what is it that they're doing well that and what's the skill I could learn from them?
That is awesome. Neil, thank you so much. Thank you to TikTok.
No worries. It's great seeing you.
Providing this opportunity. Students, thank you for joining us right across the country, Eastern Standard Time to Newfoundland time. We really appreciate you. Thank you for investing in yourself. And I think what you've done just now is a great way to say, hey, you just took an hour of your time. Maybe your club organized this for you and you got the chance to glean from and be exposed to and get some great nuggets from a great star that's been there, done that. And good for you for investing in you. So Neil, really appreciate it. Look forward to chatting more and seeing where you go from here.
For sure.
And really exciting to see where TikTok is going in Canada. It's been so amazing to see the positive impact it's made in so many ways right across the country.
100%. It's been awesome. It's always great seeing you, Darian. Take care. And thanks for having me.
This has been Digital Marketing with the Stars live lecture series, and we'll see you next month for our next live lecture. Bye, everyone. Thanks for coming.